1 minute ago, heat from Campi Flegrei surged so intensely that it began melting walls and floors in the towns above. An unstoppable force turning everyday homes into volcanic outposts. Over 500,000 people live on top of this hidden supervolcano, and experts now admit the danger is far greater than believed. What troubles me most is not what we know about this situation. It's what we're realizing we didn't understand. If the official risk assessments were wrong, what is really happening beneath these streets, and why can't anyone stop it? Campi Flegrei stretches across 8 miles. Its true boundaries hidden beneath the bustle of everyday life west of Naples. This is not the classic volcano that dominates the skyline with a smoking cone rising dramatically above the landscape. Instead, the caldera sprawls under neighborhoods, schools, ancient ruins, and busy harbors. Its rim barely noticeable to anyone except geologists who understand what they're looking at. More than 500,000 people live directly above this volcanic giant, crowded into what's called the red zone. Beyond that, over 6 million residents of the greater Naples region work, shop, and raise families within reach of its power. Think about that scale for a moment. 6 million people, the entire population of Greater London, all living within the blast radius of a supervolcano. The caldera's formation dates back 15,000 years, when an eruption so massive it emptied the underground magma chamber, left the ground above completely unsupported. The Earth collapsed inward, creating a crater wider than Manhattan, with the southern edge that now lies beneath the Bay of Pozzuoli. Over time, the landscape filled in with towns and farmland, roads and rail lines, until the original scar almost disappeared beneath the marks of civilization. But the volcano never stopped breathing. Since that ancient collapse, at least 70 eruptions have broken through the surface. 70. Each one opening new vents, new domes, new steaming fields, sometimes with little warning. For most people living here, the threat is almost invisible. Streets wind through gentle hills with only a few signs. Patches of scorched earth, the faint smell of sulfur, a sudden burst of steam from a storm drain to hint at the forces below. Children play soccer on fields that sit atop buried craters. Apartment blocks rise where hot springs once bubbled. Life continues as if the ground itself were ordinary, even as scientists track every tremor and gas release beneath their feet. Yet the risk is anything but ordinary. The caldera's footprint covers not just the city of Pozzuoli, but stretches into the heart of Naples, touching the daily routines of millions. The population density here is among the highest of any volcanic hazard zone on Earth. Emergency planners have mapped out evacuation routes and run drills, but the reality is stark. The sheer number of people, the tangle of roads, the unpredictability of the long as volcano. A rapid escape is almost impossible. Despite the calm on the surface, experts warn that ancient does not mean dormant. The caldera's hidden size and the number of people living above it turn every sign of unrest into a potential crisis. The invisible giant beneath Naples is not just a geological feature. It is a constant, looming presence shaping the fate of an entire region. 15,000 years ago, a blast unlike anything in living memory tore open the land west of Naples. The eruption at Campi Flegrei emptied so much magma from beneath the surface that the earth above caved in, swallowing forests, rivers, and ancient settlements. What remained was not a towering peak, but a sunken expanse, 8 miles wide, rimmed by low hills, and in places edged by the sea. This is the caldera, a scar from a volcanic event powerful enough to affect the climate across Europe. Scientists rank that eruption as a VEI 7, one of the largest in the continent's history. Ash from the blast blanketed the Mediterranean, and the ground itself collapsed by hundreds of feet, creating a crater that would shape the future of the entire region. But the story did not end with that collapse. Campi Flegrei has never been truly quiet. Over the millennia, at least 70 more eruptions have pierced the caldera's floor, each one leaving behind new craters, domes, and steaming fields. The most recent eruption in 1538 built the hill called Monte Nuovo in just a few days, an entire landscape feature rising from farmland within sight of terrified villagers. Parish records from that year describe darkness at noon, choking ash, the ground shaking so violently that homes split open. For weeks, the air was thick with sulfur, and crops failed across southern Italy. Even centuries after the last eruption, the land has not settled. The caldera floor rises and falls in slow, powerful pulses, a phenomenon called bradyseism, sometimes lifting the ground by meters in just a few months before sinking back again. These movements have destroyed roads, warped buildings, and forced entire neighborhoods to evacuate, only to return when the crisis seemed to pass. Eruptions at Campi Flegrei have taken many forms. Some were explosive, sending ash and pumice high into the sky. Others were quieter but no less dangerous, with boiling mud, jets of steam, and rivers of superheated gas. The caldera acts as a vast pressure cooker, its fractured floor laced with weaknesses where heat and gas can escape. Each new vent or dome is a reminder that the system beneath is restless. Even when centuries pass between eruptions, the signs of life below never disappear. Scientists have traced these cycles through layers of ash and buried ruins, finding evidence of devastation and renewal stretching back to the dawn of human settlement in the region. The scale of Campi Flegrei's eruptions has left a permanent imprint on the landscape and on the people who have lived here for thousands of years. The caldera's collapse 15,000 years ago was not the end of its story, but the beginning of a long, unpredictable relationship between volcano and civilization. Today, the quiet hills and bustling towns mask a system that remains active, its potential for destruction undiminished by the passage of time. Ancient does not mean dormant. The forces that shape this crater still move beneath the surface, ready to break through again. At the heart of Campi Flegrei, the Solfatara Pisciarelli vent has become the epicenter of a new and unmistakable threat. In the past, the steam rising from these fields was a curiosity, something tourists posed beside, something locals shrugged off. But in the last 2 years, the numbers have changed beyond anything in living memory. Automated sensors at Pisciarelli now register vent temperatures as high as 128 degrees Celsius, the highest ever recorded in modern monitoring. By comparison, just a decade ago, readings hovered closer to 110 degrees. The change is not just in the heat, but in the violence of its arrival. Carbon dioxide emissions from this single vent system have more than doubled since 2018. What was once a steady outflow around 1,500 tons per day now surges past 4,000 tons daily. These are not abstract figures. Each spike in temperature and gas output is matched by tangible consequences. Scorched earth, shriveled vegetation, a pungent sulfur odor that clings to the air for blocks around. Ground teams from the National Geophysical Institute have logged field temperatures near vent proximal walls at over 50 degrees Celsius. In some abandoned buildings just a few dozen meters from the Pisciarelli vent, the heat inside is so intense that floors have warped and mineral crusts have formed thick layers along the baseboards. The pace of change is relentless. Stepwise surges in vent activity have lined up with periods of ground uplift and earthquake swarms, each episode pushing the system further from what residents once considered normal. In 2023, a swarm of shallow quakes rattled the district, and within weeks, Paisarelli's gas emissions spiked to crisis levels. By mid-2025, the vent's output had become so extreme that civil protection agencies expanded exclusion zones and began restricting public access to entire blocks. Researchers now describe the Paisarelli-Solfatara sector as the most active and dangerous part of the caldera. Thermal cameras reveal hotspots spreading outward from the main vent, creeping beneath roads and into the foundations of nearby buildings. New fumaroles have opened along sidewalks and parking lots, sometimes overnight, forcing repeated emergency repairs. Each time the city patches a fissure, another vent appears, sometimes just meters away. These changes are not isolated to the uninhabited margins. The vent's influence now extends into residential neighborhoods, where families wake to find their walls warm to the touch and the air heavy with acid vapor. The numbers on the monitors, 128 degrees, 4,000 tons of carbon dioxide, are warning signals, but the evidence is everywhere for those who live nearby. The volcano's heat is no longer just a distant threat. It is a force pressing up through the ground, altering the landscape, and invading the spaces people once called safe. Inside a deserted apartment block near the Paisarelli fumarole, the walls and floors have transformed into something alien. Every surface is coated in a thick, crusty layer of yellow and white minerals, sulfur, silica, iron, fused by volcanic heat. The original paint and concrete are barely visible beneath the deposits. In some rooms, the mineral buildup is so dense it blurs the corners between wall and floor, forming a hardened shell that cracks underfoot. The air hangs heavy with the sharp tang of sulfur and acid, a constant reminder that this is no ordinary decay. This is not just a story of neglect. Municipal records show that as recently as 2016, families still lived here. Complaints began with strange warmth in the floors, then the appearance of salty streaks along the baseboards. By 2018, thermal cameras recorded floor temperatures of nearly 50 degrees Celsius. Residents reported dizzy spells and burning sensations on their feet. Civil protection teams measured carbon dioxide levels in ground floor rooms at 9,000 parts per million, far above safe limits. Soon after, the building was declared uninhabitable. Doors and windows were sealed, but the volcano continued its work. Fumarolic gas found new pathways, punching through cracks and utility conduits, leaving behind a new crust with every pulse of steam. The scale of this takeover forced scientists to rethink what was happening beneath Campi Flegrei. For years, official models placed the main magma reservoir deep below the caldera, buffered by solid cap rock, a protective layer, a barrier between the heat and the surface. But the evidence inside these buildings, the heat, the mineral ooze, the unstoppable advance of volcanic gases, suggested something fundamentally different. Researchers Giovanni Chiodini and Christopher Kilburn led a series of studies beginning in 2023 that challenged the old assumptions. Their team used seismic tomography and gas monitoring to map the movement of fluids and heat through the subsurface. The data pointed to a shallow gas-rich zone only 2 to 4 kilometers beneath the surface, much closer than previous estimates suggested. To test their findings, Chiodini's group built a laboratory model of the caldera's caprock using a moka pot, an Italian coffee maker, as an analog. As pressure built beneath the simulated lid, gas forced its way through weak points, just as it does in the real caldera. The experiment showed that catastrophic failure could occur even without a large, obvious ascent of magma. Just gas, just pressure, just the relentless push of volcanic fluids finding pathways through fractured rock. This new understanding explained the sudden, destructive appearance of mineral crusts and heat in buildings. The system beneath Campi Flegrei is primed, its shallow reservoir able to transmit pressure and gas upward with little warning. The implications are clear in the abandoned structures around Paisarelli. Each mineral-coated wall is a record of the volcano's reach, a physical archive of every surge in heat and gas. These are not isolated incidents, but proof that the processes reshaping the ground below are now rewriting the surface above. For the scientists watching these changes, the evidence inside these rooms is as important as any seismic graph or gas reading. It is the volcano's message written in stone and sulfur. A message that says the threat is no longer hidden. On Via Antinana, the Mascolo family faces a reality that statistics cannot capture. Their apartment, just a short walk from the Pisciarelli fumaroles, has become a daily test of endurance. At night, they open windows to let the acidic air escape, then check the walls for blistered paint or fresh mineral streaks. The youngest child sleeps with a fan pointed at his bed because the outer wall radiates so much heat that the plaster feels like a stovetop. If you put your hand on the wall, it isn't warm. It's terribly hot, says Mrs. Mascolo, her voice tight with worry. Each morning, the family inspects the living room for new signs of damage. Some days, the mineral ooze has crept another inch up from the floorboards, leaving a yellow crust that flakes onto the tiles. The air smells sharp and metallic, especially after rain when gases push harder through the cracks. On bad nights, the family moves mattresses to the hallway as far as possible from the exterior walls. Financial strain compounds the physical discomfort. Last winter alone, repairs swallowed more than 6,000 euros. Money spent on heat-resistant paint, makeshift ventilation, repeated sealing of fissures that always reopen. Insurance companies refuse to cover the damage, citing volcanic exclusion clauses. Selling is not an option. Property values have plummeted, and few buyers are willing to risk a home in the shadow of the fumarole. For the Mascolos, every decision is shaped by the volcano's unpredictable mood. Some neighbors have left for good, but others, like the family's grandfather, insist on staying. We watch from the balcony as steam curls up in the street. And every morning, we check if the paint is blistering. The volcano is not just beneath their feet. It has invaded their home, their routines, and their sense of safety. It has become a presence in their daily lives as real as the furniture in their rooms. Civil protection officials now face a crisis that outpaces their ability to respond. The network of seismic and gas sensors meant to track Campi Flegrei's unrest has developed dangerous blind spots. In early 2024, several monitoring stations around the Solfatara crater went offline for weeks at a time. Technicians blamed geothermal damage and budget shortfalls, but the result was the same. Critical data gaps during periods of rapid change. A municipal worker summed up the mood. We can fix the machines, but not if the money runs out. Every extra week offline is a gamble. While sensors struggled, the ground itself delivered unmistakable warnings. On the night of October 12, 2024, a swarm of shallow earthquakes rattled Pozzuoli, cracking open the main artery of Via Napoli. Shops and schools shut down. Emergency crews cordoned off leaking gas zones and set up temporary shelters. Yet every time workers patched the road, new steaming vents burst through the asphalt by morning. It was as if the earth decided our repairs were pointless, said a shop owner, still guarding his storefront days later. The pattern is relentless. Across the caldera, a game of volcanic whack-a-mole plays out. Fixes vanish overnight, vents reappear wherever they please. In 2025, researchers using artificial intelligence mapped thousands of microquakes that had gone undetected by the standard network. These swarms cluster along a newly identified ring fault encircling the caldera, a structure that could focus future earthquakes and amplify the risk. The limits of authority are clear. City budgets are drained. Repairs are temporary. Officials quietly admit we can't stop it, just manage it. The volcano's acceleration is now measured not just in data, but in broken streets and sleepless nights. Over 500,000 people live directly atop the Campi Flegrei caldera, a supervolcano whose last major eruption occurred 15,000 years ago. In recent months, scientific monitoring has confirmed a sharp rise in vent temperatures and gas emissions, with mineral deposits now encasing walls and floors in several buildings near Solfatara and Paisiarelli. New studies have revealed that magma is far closer to the surface than once, believed, challenging earlier hazard models. Despite these advances in understanding, scientists still cannot predict if or when a major eruption might occur. Many monitoring stations have suffered outages during critical periods. The accelerating pattern of microquakes and the unstoppable invasion of volcanic materials into homes and streets are documented facts. What remains unknown is the full timeline and ultimate extent of this crisis. The evidence is clear. Campi Flegrei is not dormant, and the risks for the surrounding communities are immediate and real. The volcano has stopped hiding behind geological models and academic uncertainty. It is now writing its story on the walls of ordinary homes. It is forcing families to make impossible choices about whether to stay or flee from a threat they cannot see but can feel with their hands. It is testing the limits of what a modern city can endure when built atop a force that refuses to stay silent. Every mineral crust, every heated wall, every sealed building is a message from the earth below. And the message is clear. The volcano is not waiting for the scientists to agree on models or for the officials to coordinate responses. It is already here. It is already invading. And for 500,000 people, it has become impossible to ignore.